He's the behind-the-scenes expert who's helped legends like Lance Armstrong, Tiger Woods, and U2 hit the stratosphere of success.
You know, everybody's saying a t-shirt, believe, believe, believe. Well, believing's not enough. The Tour de France is like, to me, the ultimate life clinic, because in 3 weeks, you're going to live every experience that you're going to live in a lifetime.
Some breaking news now on Lance Armstrong.
You know, Lance is being stripped of the 7 Tour de France titles. Those were not reassigned to anybody. Because, well, why not? Well, because the admission of the other cyclists that they were doing the same thing. The 30s is probably the most impactful decade that sets the person up for the next couple of decades, but most of the time it's really mismanaged, where a person blows themselves up. If we expect to learn our life lessons from a perfect individual, then don't plan on learning anything from anybody. You know, some people look at Lance as a devil and a demon, and some people look at him as a god, a deity, you know? And it's like, me, Jeff, I never looked at him as either. I looked at him as human.
Today, we've got a heavyweight in the game, the one and only Dr. Jeffrey Spencer. He's the behind-the-scenes expert who's helped legends like Lance Armstrong, Tiger Woods, and U2 hit the stratosphere of success. But hold on, Dr. Spencer isn't your average coach. We're talking about the former Olympic cyclist who snagged the Sports Chiropractor of the Year title in 2004. Oh, and he's got a Tour de France winning streak that will make your jaw drop just about 8 times. Now here's where it gets even more exciting. Dr. Spencer isn't just about cycling. He's the go-to guru for winners in golf, tennis, racing, baseball, football, and rock music. Yeah, you heard that right. He's the secret sauce for those chasing greatness in every field. In today's episode, we're pulling back the curtain with Dr. Spencer. We'll be delving into the nitty-gritty of how he turns high achievers into absolute superstars, from cultivating the right mindset to crafting genius-level plans and keeping the physical expertise in check. He's the guy with the golden key, so buckle up for the ride filled with epic tales and insider knowledge as we unravel the secrets behind the success with the incredible Dr. Jeffrey Spencer. Dr. Spencer, thank you so much for joining me.
Okay, it's such a pleasure to be here.
Of course. So I want to start off by reading something that Lance Armstrong actually wrote about you in his book, which I'm sure you're very much aware of at this point. He wrote, Jeff is part doctor, part guru, part medicine man. We believe Jeff could fix any and all of our problems. While he fixed us physically, he also fixed us mentally. If you judge the most important man on the postal team by the foot traffic in and out of his door, then it was Jeff. Without him, we knew we'd never make it to Paris. How did it feel when you heard one of the greatest athletes of our lifetime say, we would never make it to Paris if it wasn't because of you?
I felt like I did my job. And, you know, it's a privilege to be part of something that is that not only important to individuals and a team, but the Tour de France is like, to me, the ultimate life clinic, because in 3 weeks, you're going to live every experience that you're going to live in a lifetime. And it's not like a bad day where you can just go home and sleep it off and get up the next day. I mean, you're stuck there for a month and you got to show up and you got to perform. Injured, sick, it doesn't matter. And so the trust that was given to me by Lance and the team to do whatever I had to do to bring the most innovative approaches and methodologies to getting and staying well and being able to stay in the mental game and be able to finish the job was just an amazing honor. And, you know, Lance is a very interesting human being on a variety of different levels. And when I first heard that, it does reflect a bit of a challenge that I've always had. Nobody knows what to call me. You know, it's like, well, what exactly do you do? You know, are you a coach? Well, actually, there's something other than a coach. You know, there's a mentor and then there's a cornerman. You know, well, you're a doctor. Well, yes, that's part of what I do. So, you know, take it as a sum total with my experience and my competency and just about everything. I can and do have a 360-degree view of every person and every group that I work with. I'm not just a singular entity that sees it through one lens. And to me, that's the advantage, because I know how much of what needs to be there in a synergistic way to be able to create the exponential boost in performance required that can only come when the parts of a system are harmonized. So again, it was a great validation for me because it told me I did the right thing, and I just showed up and did what I had to do to deliver on my side of the equation.
It's funny because when I was doing my research on you and the way you describe Tour de France, it's kind of like, I think of it as like the military, like people that go to the Marines and like it's at the Navy SEALs, and it's like pushing you to the limit. And I don't think the average person really thinks of it like that, because we're sitting at home eating our popcorn, watching them ride, watching them do their thing. And we're not really taking into consideration all those things. So when you took that job, being part of the postal team, do you remember the first day? What was going through your head on the first day on the job?
Well, first off, every tour you prepare specifically for, because the route always changes and the team dynamics are different. It's all about the preparation. The champion's golden rule is you do the homework and the test is easy. So when you do the homework right, then you show up for the test and you just don't start changing things. But I think the one thing that happened on the very first day of Lance's return from cancer to competition at the tour, he actually called me over to him just a couple minutes before the start of that individual race was going to happen. There's 21 stages of racing over the 3 weeks of the tour itself. And he said, I'm having trouble with my back. Can you do anything? And I looked at the time and it was like 30 seconds before he had to go. And I said, yes. And so I had him get off the bike and I laid him down on the ground there, and I did a procedure, and he got up and like, hey, man, healed 100%, good to go. And so that was an important moment, because I knew what to do in a critical situation. And when you're dealing with high stakes, you can't be timid and you can't be average. You have to bring something extraordinary. You have to have a library that you can find the solution to if you can interpret the problem correctly, and you have to deliver with confidence and certainty. And if it's just average, well, then the average isn't good enough. It has to be something extraordinary in nature. And that's just the way that I've always been, because I have a really big reservoir and library of points that I can refer to apply in various situations. So it's really about pattern recognition and being able to take action when action needs to be taken. You also have to know when not to do anything. You can always get in there and screw it up, which a lot of people do, but that's kind of comes with maturity and understanding the nature of what you're doing and being very confident in your ability to assess it. And that also gave Lance an incredible amount of confidence in me, because we were no longer on the practice field. We were on the on the playing field, where the blood flows and where the gold is won.
I love the way you just mentioned like exam tests and stuff like that. And I love the way you describe winning and success. It's a way that I've never really heard it before. You always explain as it's a learned skill that needs to be understood and applied. And no one really talks about success like that. It's like, you need to do this, and the way you describe it is amazing. And the way you brought up exam is exactly how I thought of it when I heard you say it. I think of it as you do your homework, you study, you do your homework, you take the exam, you pass, you're successful. What's that one question on the test that majority of people would tend to get wrong? Because any test we take, right? There's always that one question that the majority of class gets wrong. When it comes to success and taking that test, what's that one question that people always tend to not understand really well and need multiple referring back to?
Well, the multiple referring back to usually means multiple failures that didn't deliver on the promise, is what that means. Well, in my opinion, it's usually volume and intensity. They think that doing more and pushing harder is going to get you to the finish line, which it won't. I mean, the more stuff that you have, the slower and less agile you become, the more indecisive you are in terms of making your choices. So in my opinion, things have to be as streamlined as possible, and you can't have too many options that are too similar, because then again, you get paralyzed. Oh my God, am I going to choose the wrong one? But human nature thinks that there are the safety in numbers. I mean, that's actually a saying, safety in numbers. I think there's confusion in numbers, quite honestly. And if you know exactly where you are and you know what it is that you're preparing for, because you've done the recon correctly and you've done your preparation correctly, and it's the right thing at the right time for the right reasons, then it becomes very simple. The human mind can't mindset. Let me change that. The human mindset can't accept that less is better. That's the reason why, people are terminally burnt out, because they're so afraid of getting left behind because they haven't done enough, that they overdo it, and they're terminally overtrained, overprepped, too much stuff, feel like they're behind, trying to rush to catch up, and all of that is a recipe for disaster.
But as I mentioned in the intro, you competed in the Olympics, and it took you 14 years to compete in the Olympics. At 7, you had the vision, and at 21, you made it happen. In 1972 is when you competed in the Olympics as a sprint cyclist. And you were able to make it happen through writing down 3 phrases on a piece of paper. You wrote down, be brave, work hard, no excuses.
Right.
Walk me through those 14 years. Once you had the vision, how did you start working towards your goals of being an Olympian?
Well, I want to kind of get something kind of worked out here, because the vision was really a calling. I didn't choose it. It chose me. It's not like I was out there pursuing something. No, it's like it showed up in my consciousness, and there was a resonant recognition of it to be true. And I kind of know how my truth speaks to me. And when I get that gravity, that kind of black hole gravity, where there's a kind of a pull towards something, and I know that it's a green light situation, I always follow that. That's been how I've lived my life. People say, well, how do you choose your dreams? I don't choose dreams. I answer callings, because callings always provide and offer a much bigger outcome, makes the journey so much more interesting. Because if it's a dream, you're a technician trying to get from where you are to where you want to get to, but when it's a calling, it's a different situation. So I think that's really an important distinction with this. The other side of this is that I had a coach that came to me, my cycling coach, that chose me. Actually, again, I was chosen. And actually, even to back up further from that, to say that I had no idea how I was going to become an Olympian. I didn't choose cycling. Cycling chose me, because there was a competitive cycling team that asked me to go on a ride with them. It was a 25-mile ride. And I don't know anything about cycling, so I hustled a bicycle and I went on a 25-mile ride with the team. And at the end of the 25 miles, they were tired and I wasn't. So wait a minute, what's the deal here?
But
so
why did they ask you? Why did they ask you to go on the cycling if you were not really cycling? Why did they reach out to you?
Well, because I was really athletic as a kid. All I liked to do is, put cannonballs and jump over things. And I was a very physical person, but I also had a certain, mental way of looking at this in a kind of unique way. So they felt maybe something's there. And, people are always encouraging others, at least they should be, to exploring, which is another side of this, is that every one of us has untapped potential within us. We don't even know that. We don't know what our limit is. I mean, come on, nobody does, because of untapped potential. It's not like something you go and order online or you can buy from a store. It has to be revealed by exposure to people, places, and things. And when we have that exposure, like I did, and I realized that there's a connection here I had no idea that existed, and it was out of the charity and goodwill of other people that they invited me to come just to see, well, perhaps this person is in the wrong sport, and maybe they need an alternative. So that's how that happened. And so my cycling coach chose me as a 3-time Olympian, 5-time national champion. And he said, Jeff, I want you to come and train with my group. My group is older riders. We're in our late 20s and early 30s. All of us are champions, world Olympic champions. And you're not, but you're there. And I'm choosing you to come because I want you to listen to the conversation. And I want you to see what's happening here. And if you have it already within you to recognize the language and track with the training methodologies, and there's a connection with that, then you have the potential to become an Olympian. I can't put anything into you that's not already there. So that was a very, very unique way of looking at it. It's not trying harder to get somewhere. It's like, okay, if there's a potential within you, it just needs to be awakened from its dormant state, which it was, because I understood what the older champions were talking about. I had a connection to it. I understood it. I understood the training methodologies, even though I did a much lesser scale of that. It was like a perfect fit for me. And my coach also said that, winning is a learned behavior. It's not something that you're naturally born with. Survival is not deliberate preparation for something specific. So, the idea of having the natural ability and inclination to pursue something, to cultivate and grow it, especially over 10 years. I mean, it took me 10 years once I went on the bicycle ride to then become an Olympian, but it's not that difficult if you've been called to something and you have somebody that can help you pace yourself appropriately from where you are to where you want to get to give yourself a chance. Most people don't do that. Their aspirations are way too big, way too early. And they think since they can't get there, that they're not capable of getting there. It's just really too much too fast because they haven't learned the skill of winning yet, in my opinion.
So winning,
And so
yeah, go
that's
ahead.
how I did it.
So when
That's how I did it.
you say winning is a learned behavior, but
Yeah.
when your coach called you there and he just basically sat back and said, and like, look at what we're doing, and if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. But there had to be some. Does that mean that talent? You're born with talent, because there has to be
Everybody
something.
is.
So the talent is something that you have to be born with, right? Because
Well,
how does it spark that energy in your brain that's your calling if not you're not born with it? And you know what I mean?
well, that could be a fantasy in your own head about seeing yourself as a rock star and wanting to be that. But we have this idea it can be whatever you want, and that's not true either. Because if you don't have the basic capacity to do it, no amount of will can get you to where you want to get to because you don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm never going to be a mathematician or an accountant or an engineer because my brain isn't wired like that.
Gotcha.
It just isn't, And so, again, every person on this planet has a capacity of some sort, and that capacity needs to be revealed in time, again, through proximity to people, places, and things. But then we have this challenge called the human way of thinking and looking at life that looks at things through its own lens that may not be real. It may not have the capacity to get them to some place. I think there's a lot of mythology out there. Look, there's only one of everybody in all of creation, which means that we're uniquely gifted with capacities to do something that nobody else can do in this creation. But do we, and are we exposed, and are we within proximity in the environment, and are we nurtured? I think environment's the best thing because the environment will call out and draw to the surface our natural untapped potentials. But then the environment has to be able to cultivate that, because obviously if it's there and seen, but it's not cultivated and applied, well, then we don't get to the winner's circle. So I've not found what I just said there, like, not to be true, but I know that there's a lot of people, probably more people than less people, that are frustrated. They don't believe in themselves. They believe that they can't do it because they've tried things that perhaps are outside the scope of what the capacity really is. And they feel like something's wrong with me because I can't get to where I want to get to. Well, I think we're ignoring a major gift of what our potential is as an individual. But so if you match the potential that you see with who you are, and be mindful that potential is a moment by moment process of evolution over a lifetime that's never finished. You never get to the finish circle on this thing. So again, in my opinion, there needs to be a very high degree of respect on where a person is and what they're doing. And there has to be a container and a philosophy behind it. I choose to go with what history tells us to be true, not the pop psychology of the moment, to be able to move forward with our ambitions.
Yeah. A really good friend of mine, Chris Rudin, he always has a quote that he goes by. He says, "Limitations are self-imposed." And
I think part of that is absolutely true, and the limitations that that we have as humans. Excuse me, just one second here. I just needed to blow something here. The limitations that we impose upon ourselves. In what I will say on this as well, I just spilled some water here. But what I will say also is that the idea of an ongoing evolution is a very important critical side of this, because if we don't give ourselves a chance to grow over time progressively, we will not develop a belief in self that we can do it. And I think a lot of people are way too premature trying to get someplace too fast because too much emphasis is being put on, well, how are you going to impact 1 billion people? Well, some people are meant to go nano. They're not meant to go macro at that size. And so they feel, well, the experts are telling me this, but I'm not aligned with that. I can't make myself be it. I'll try it, but it's not happening. Therefore, I'm faulty. I can never get there and make a contribution of value, which isn't true at all. So,
yeah. So I'm an immigrant to this country. I came out here when I was 10 years old with my parents, and no English, no nothing. My parents didn't know English. So it was a lot of self-learning, self-motivating for myself. Because as I moved on to college, my parents obviously have never been to college in the United States, or have not been to college, period. And I had to teach myself a lot of things. And there's something that you spoke about. You said you have the self-start gene and are self-motivated. And I really clicked with that, because also when I, in undergraduate studies, one of my friends told me, Nima, you're your own cheerleader, I feel like. And I kind of connected with you when you said that you had the self-start gene and self-motivated. How much of that do you think is because you were raised not depending much on your parents for their support? Because you spoke about environment just recently right now also.
Well, my parents they were very talented. My dad was an artistic genius. My mom was similarly in writing, but I didn't really have any structure from them. I didn't really get any guidance. It was more like blank slate. You figured out.
Yeah.
They were not malicious, and they didn't discourage me from doing anything. But so I guess it never occurred to me that parents were there to help you out. I guess it felt that, well, it's up to us to figure it out. I a natural curiosity, and I was, really good at strategizing things and knowing how to explore certain things, because they didn't have a limitation, and I wasn't being told what to do and why. Like there's a lot of people, a lot of parents that try way too hard to be of service to their children, where they're really disabling them from learning their own lessons, trying to control how they think and what they do. I get it's well intended, but that doesn't always serve the development of the person correctly. And I do feel that, we go back to this idea of potential. I think potential is the least defined topic that everybody wants, but I don't see that it's been dissected and looked at in a very, I was going to say responsible way, but that's not the right word. I don't think that it's really been looked at through the eyes of what it really means and how you get there, quite honestly. Everything goes back to, if you want it bad enough, it's going to happen. Just be more detailed, work harder, sleep less, want it bad enough, and somehow everything magically backfills. And that's not the way that it works. So, the self gene, I don't know what you can do with the person that doesn't have self-start. You just got to sort of leave them. And if they don't like their life and they're a whiner type, well, you kind of choose your whining. You choose your wine, so to speak.
Do you think all champions have self-start gene?
100%. Yeah, because it's like, look, Lance couldn't have someone pedal his bicycle for him. Branson didn't have somebody build his 450 companies that he's involved in. Bono didn't rely on somebody to do for him what he needed to do for himself. But that's also the confidence side of it. Like, if you can't demonstrate for yourself your ability to do it, then how is this ever going to happen? Because you're the one that has to show up and get the job done to push the rock up the hill every day. So again, to me, it's equally important. That's why the point of development and the moment that every moment offers has a full potential response to it. We can continue our evolution appropriately, because the idea is, in my opinion, is that you want to learn the skill of winning to manifest your potential, because I believe that that's a moral imperative why we're here on this planet. And you can't just guess and you can't just wish at it. It doesn't self-manifest. It takes time and energy to learn the skill. And I just don't think that that's part of it. Everybody's saying a t-shirt, believe, believe, believe. Well, believing's not enough. You can believe forever, but if the action steps aren't done in the dimension that we're living in, space, time, and energy, well, then how is this supposed to move along if there's no, energy behind it, and there's no evolutionary process behind it that only a person could do? And confidence is a demonstration that you are making progress because you are learning progressively skills. And if you can do it small, you just keep adding to it. And then over time, you get to a place where critical mass is hit, where you really believe that you can do things because you've learned the skill of it and you've demonstrated it to yourself that you can do it. And to me, here's the other side of this, is that, most people are in such a rush to try to get someplace, building their career, especially in the 30s. The 30s is probably the most impactful decade that sets the person up for the next couple of decades. But most of the time, it's really mismanaged, where a person blows themselves up too much, too fast, too many assumptions being made that aren't true, actions taken, risks are taken on what I think it is when it's really not. And so my point there is that in what happens, you got about 20, 30 years of reserve on board in your body, and then you ultimately blow yourself up. So if you start at 20, then 40 to 60 is where you generally blow yourself up. And it could be a catastrophic relationship failure, it could be a financial ruin, it could also be a health event. All of that's preventable, but people aren't going to listen because they just feel, well, it hasn't hurt me so far, therefore I can just keep pushing. No, the tank is draining in the car. You just don't know it. And all of a sudden, when you're out of gas in the fast lane, well, the car dies in the fast lane, So I think these are things that we need to be mindful of, because when you get to a place where you've learned the skill of winning, then you can start creating repetitively your best works and amass a legacy of value to others. And it also creates a life of passion, purpose, productivity, and prosperity for ourselves. But most people don't get there. There's some nasty event that usually happens in the late 30s, early 40s that can derail, 20 years of effort and progress. It's all preventable, but people don't listen, just the way it is. They think they're immune from it until they're in the hospital, thinking about what happened. Hospital meaning, well, not just physically, but just, mentally. And, we just have basically blown ourselves up chasing the finish line or the winner's circle just too much too fast. This is just classic humanity.
It's funny. You went to chiropractic school because the athletes, basically, it was your calling. Yeah, the callings that came toward your way. That's why you went to chiropractic school. The athletes were like, hey, how can you help? Go ahead.
But it was also business people, because
I was going to say,
idea. I was an Olympian, therefore I work with athletes only. I don't know. I work exclusively in the business world.
Yeah.
And so the idea here is that the athletes, I need to extend my career. Injury prevention and management are the keys to that. And the people in business, look, there are people dying of strokes and heart attacks in their late 30s and early 40s in business because they push themselves way too long, way too hard, way too fast, too early. And so I realized that I needed to develop and have a primary licensure to be able to support them in managing that, so they were confident, knew that they had what it took to be able to continue pressing forward with the growth of their life experience, but knowing that they're safely within limits where they're not going to go down for the count. And that's a really, really, really important aspect to this.
So exactly. And then, but when I was reading up on you and then watching all your previous interviews, I'm like, okay, I understand that. But when I hear you talk, you sound so much like a psychologist. And it's like you really studied the brain and mind and how the mind works. Why have you ever considered getting the psychology degree? Since
No.
Was that not an interest of yours? Because it seems like you're really fascinated by the mind.
Well, I think I'm really good at it because I'm naturally inclined to it. I don't need to go back to school to learn what I already know. That's not an efficient use of my time to share what I know with the people that I work with. No, because it's like, to me, there's different levels of advisory. You can have like a coach, like when I work with U2, Bono had his voice coach. Great. Well, okay. Well, that's a small sliver of what's required for Bono to be Bono. And you could have a mentor, this got a little bit more bandwidth that, again, it could be a life mentor, it could be a business mentor. But then there's like Rocky had the old guy in his corner, Mickey, and Mickey was an old guy that had seen everything in real time. And he knew what to do in real time while Rock was slugging it out in the ring, either trying to avoid the knockout blow or deliver it. Mickey knew how to guide him through the real action where the blood flows and the world champions are won, which is on the pavement. And so for me, history doesn't lie. Our mind does trick us in pop psychologies that sound good, but don't have a body of evidence and people always want the advantage, so they always go for the new thing early. I'm not so sure about that, because I think that history, if we look at it, provides us with a lot of insight on what works and what doesn't work. And I'm a student of history, and I'm a student of humanity just because I am. I'm much better studying humanity and seeing connections between things than I am reading a book, reading a 300-page book to learn, one thing. That, my age, that just isn't a good use of my time. So, and the other part about this is that, from my perspective, for myself, I said that nobody knows what to call me, because wait a minute, you're sort of a psychologist here. Yeah, I guess I am. I'm just giving you advice based upon what I know to be true, because any conversation I have with anybody, I can pretty much know exactly where they are, what they're thinking, where they're headed, and they don't. And so if you know where they're headed and they don't, well then, and you know how they're thinking and what they perhaps should be adjusting to capitalize on opportunity and avoid preventable problems, then in my opinion, then that's getting the job done. So I like where I am. I like what I'm doing. I love people. I really care about people living a life where they can look back and they can walk off the field and they can say, you know what, there's nothing more I could have done in this dimension to make it any better, because I show up, I learn my lessons like everybody does, and there's nothing more I could have done. And I feel like if we can get to that place, and then you're living a life of, you have lived a life like well spent. And let me say one more thing here, is that to me, the most important thing that anybody should do before you do anything, very most important thing, you got to get clarity on three things. Don't move until you get clarity on three things. Number one, we have to be clear about what the ambitions are and how they relate to a person's asset and their skill level and their natural aptitudes. And so you may have a constellation of different targets and ambitions and goals that fall within that description. And that would be the equivalent of, let's say, like a GPS destination. And then the next thing that a person needs to have, in my opinion, is that you need to really understand your state of readiness. To me, that is the single most important thing, because your state of readiness determines the time, energy, and resources required to pursue and achieve any of the goals that you previously listed. And so to me, that's like the thumbtack that represents you. And you have this giant map on the wall that represents life and life's opportunity. You better be able to take this thumbtack and put it on the exact spot on the map that represents you. Because if you can't do that, that's a GPS that is guessing at the starting destination. So, and if that is the case, then you're guessing at your life. And so what happens, all you do is do everything possible to get to the finish line. Well, yeah, but where are you? Would you actually go into the jungle? You can get killed in the jungle. There's danger out there. Would you actually go into that without a map and not knowing where you're starting? I don't think so. So you got to know the ambitions that naturally occur to you. Some of them could be mythology, some of them can be appropriate, but let's get it all out there. Number two, where are you? How do you think? Where have you been? What were your early influences? What are your aptitudes? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your blind spots? And if we know that, then we can take the thumbtack and confidently say, you're here. Okay, great. So if you're here and these are the options, well, now we can start to create the path. And the path is not conjecture, but it allows us to see with explicit clarity, what are the initial steps that we know to be true based upon where you are and where you're headed. So now we've already gained control of the journey, where most people are just freaking out of control. They're paying tens of thousands of dollars for the magic carpet ride to the finish line that has been promised to them if they buy this and they do this, blah, 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 blah. And so for me, I think that, to me, that is the most important thing that anybody should ever do, because that way you can really look at it on paper and you can say, all right, this is my plan on how I'm going to get to the, how I'm going to win my gold medal. As a matter of fact, how I use that in my service to the people that I work with, that's the first thing I always do with everybody. We explicitly go into this in depth, and it's a pretty, extensive thing, but it's got to be done, man. Yeah. Otherwise you're just guessing. And now in today's world with the uncertainty, you don't want to guess, in my opinion. Just please don't do that.
Yeah. It's I like how you brought it up multiple times. You said, people don't know how to label me. And I love that, because that means you've created a path for yourself that didn't exist before. And right, I'm a pharmacist, and the doctor of pharmacy degree actually is a fairly new degree. When it became standardized in the year 2000, it was a thing before, but before it was a bachelor's degree for pharmacists. Now it's a doctor of pharmacy degree as of 2000. So it's a fairly new degree, and it's a pharmacy advancement. It's something that I push a lot, and I try to encourage people to understand. It's like, hey, we need to push the pharmacy advancement. It's fairly new. You brought a formal mental physical training into the motocross world, which created a new path within the sport that others could follow and make a career out of. It didn't exist. How would
Right.
you advise someone that is looking to create a new path that doesn't exist within a specific field?
Yeah, I did that for motorsports as well. Whether jet skis, snowmobiles, Indy cars, whatever. I was sort of the guy that brought a formal approach to that,
Yeah.
put that on the map in the early 80s. Well, I think first and foremost, there are several things. Number one, there has to be a concrete idea that one knows to be true, and there has to be a structure behind it that can convey the promise of that to the person engaging the opportunity. And it has to make sense to the people that the product or the offer would be created for. There's got to be explicit language. It has to make sense to the person. And sometimes it takes a while to figure that out. Like in my advisory model, it took me a long time to figure it out because it was never institutionalized to take on and be a cookie cutter person on the production line of an existing program, because I knew that the existing stuff wasn't comprehensive enough and it was too laborious. I felt that there was a much better way. So there's obviously a process of trying, implementing, receiving, adjusting, and evolving over time. But you don't want to wait too long. There's a moment in time where you should. The methodology is created enough to be able to implement it, and then you start to get blowback, and then you can adjust it moving forward. But at least you've got the space shuttle off the launching pad, which also implies that it's just not the methodology, but there has to be an overall business approach to this as well. There has to be a promotional side of this that lets the offer be known to humanity, that speaks to those people, that we be candidates for the service being offered. Mm-hmm. So there's that promotional side, then there's the sales side, where then there's an enrollment from the person, people group into the process of getting the benefits of the product itself. And then there's accounting, there's other aspects of business that have to be there. And so it's not just the idea. It's not just writing the book. The book has PR, it's got marketing, it's got sales, it's got accounting, it's got executive committee, it's got vendors, there's all sorts of parts to it. And I feel like people don't understand that there are multiple sides to this that are important, and a product idea needs to be exposed to reality to test the merits of it. And then the blowback from that informs about what upgrades can be made to improve the product. And we only know that by going live with it. And so I also suggest that people don't try to go live too early. You got to make sure that there is something that has substance enough where people understand, like the computer companies, they'll put a program upgrade and they know that there's going to be glitches they can't find, but everybody kind of knows that, so it would be kind of exactly the same thing. And I think a lot of people are timid and they think it's got to be perfect before you start. It doesn't. So, again, this goes back to three things, man. It goes back to, what are the aspirations? What is my state of readiness? Do I have the path to get there? And now we kind of define the path. It's got these multiple aspects to it that have to be there to gain momentum, to truly test, develop a product, to be able to see what the maximum value that can be derived from it, from the creator plus the end user.
That's awesome. I would really been waiting to ask you this question. The yellow bands, the Livestrong bands, it has a powerful meaning. I remember when I was in school and they came out, like, you were the kid if you had these bands on. Like, you had to have one. It went beyond what it was made for. It became a fashion statement, kind of. those bands to me represented the champion's mindset that you speak of. They became more than just a wristband. Do you remember when you got your first band and have any specific memories involving the yellow band?
I do. I'm sitting there. It's just like we were in the team bus, and the team bus transports the riders from the hotel to the start of the tour stage that day. It's got showers in it. It's got the kitchen. I mean, it's really quite sophisticated, actually. And so I remember someone came and they had this bag, and they took this, and they it was in like a little wrapper.
Yes. I remember.
Yeah. And so one of the riders said, "What's with the flea collar?" I don't know if because it was so foreign, nobody knew what to do with it. So the guy called it a flea collar. If you put on a cat or a dog, it's like, I mean, that seemed, well, it kind of does look like that. But then the most amazing thing is that we all put them on, obviously, to honor Lance's cancer foundation is what this was all about, because the proceeds went to helping people with the cancer that Lance was a survivor of, which is an amazingly important and charitable institution that was put together that did a lot of good for like a lot of people. And it was unbelievable. I mean, people would almost pay anything to get the band because it was unveiled. And I remember we also had t-shirts. We also had shoes Nike made. The shoes were like silver, and on the side it said "Live Strong" and the "Live Strong" yellow. Mm-hmm. And that was like an addition of one that all team members got. There were 25 people that got them. And I remember that people would pay anything. It was almost like a mob would descend to try to get the wristband or the or the shoes. So who would have known that this would have turned into something of high significance that really has set the precedent to this day? I mean, how many bracelets have been created based upon that innovative idea? And that kind of makes sense. It's amazing. So anyhow, that's how it went from flea collar to worldwide phenomenon.
When you think of global athletes, you think of Mike Tyson, Michael Jordan, Tom Brady, maybe Cristiano Ronaldo, Lionel Messi, and I think Lance Armstrong for sure is on one of the list of global sports athletes. I think from someone like my dad, which we came from Iran, English wasn't too good. If you tell him, "Hey, do you know who Mike Tyson is?" "Yeah, I do." "Do you know who Lance Armstrong is?" "Yeah, I do." "Do you know who Michael Jackson is?" "Yeah, I do." But there is certain athletes that he doesn't know. So I think that has a certain impact where it comes to what Lance had to went through after his situation. And if you don't feel comfortable talking about it, it's fine. We could take it out. How do you look at? Do you think it's fair that everything he's worked for, all the great things that he's done with the bands, with the money he's raised for cancer, it's like you've done so much great things, and you have this big little thing kind of take it all away? Were you involved at all in kind of like the mental guidance of him after that? Because I had to take some sort of toll on him to everything he's worked so hard from that it's kind of like taken away.
We're talking about the admission of drug use,
yes,
correct? So we're talking about, well, I mean, the first thing I want to say here is that, my contribution to Lance and the tour, I come from a drugless, non-surgical background. And so that's why I was brought in to do what I do. And so therefore I had no knowledge of the use of the drugs, et cetera. And I was subpoenaed by the FBI they came to my house and paid me a visit, did the shakedown and everything, which is completely okay because, as I told them, we want the truth and I'll tell you what I know.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know anything. I didn't see anything. I didn't hear anything. And so they just said, well, there's nothing here, so you don't need to show up for a federal grand jury trial or whatever they call that. So the other side of this, I think what's important to acknowledge here too, there are a couple things I want to say is that, number one, Lance is being stripped of the 7 Tour de France titles. Those were not reassigned to anybody because, well, why not? Well, because the admission of the other cyclists that they were doing the same thing. And that's not me because I had no direct knowledge of that. I'm just saying that that's what came out of the investigation, but somehow it seems like people want to remember Lance, not this other thing. So is it really a level playing field in a certain sense? Because there are inconsistencies there that I think are really hard to reconcile. And the other side of this as well is the distribution of consequence that those that did have the admission about needs to be kind of looked at and evaluated as well. And that's about as much as I want to say about that side of it. And the other thing, I was buried as deeply in the team as anybody could get at the tour. And there was never any evidence of that at the tour. And I had access to all the writers' rooms and all that because that's what I did. I played an essential role in their recoveries and things like that. So again, that's what I wanted to say. But I have one more thing I want to say here is that, some people look at Lance as a devil and a demon. And some people look at him as a god and a deity, and it's like, me, Jeff, I never looked at him as either. I looked at it as human, is what I did. And the amount of time that we spent together, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours on the table, talking and working. And here's what I do know is that if we expect to learn our life lessons from a perfect individual, then don't plan on learning anything from anybody. And it's our loss because we turned our back on something that could have been extraordinarily helpful to us by ignoring the good stuff. Because Lance did a lot of really good stuff for people. He honored his ability on a bike. He had leadership ability. He did the Armstrong Foundation, and I just feel at a certain point in time that the value of this in its own way, people have their own opinions. But for me, this is a case study in the human condition, quite honestly. The ability to cast the first stone, should we say, our ability for redemption. There are certain things that we all do that we see at the time may seem like a good idea. In this case, it wasn't a single opinion. It was done in a mass way within the peloton itself and beyond. So it gets complicated. And so all I want to say is with this is that, we as humans, being a human is messy just because we're kind of a dual nature. We have a survival side to us. We have an aspirational side that's in conflict with itself 24 hours a day. And all I can say is this, is that for myself, being given the trust by Lance and by the administration of the team to do whatever I had to do to bring the most effective means of providing what I could bring to it in terms of keeping the riders in the game through injury management and prevention and recovery, both physically and mentally. See, they just didn't have a human mindset. They had a champion's mind. And a champion's mind is different than a human mindset. Human mindset thinks that if you recite things, that somehow that's going to magically do for you what you need to do for yourself, where the champion's mind is being able to evaluate and see what needs to get done and showing up and executing it correctly under immense pressure. That two completely different things there. And to have been extended that privilege, for 7 years to do that, it was, in my opinion, it's a bit unheard of in sport because a lot of times there are certain barriers that are difficult to penetrate through institutional. Because I could tell you this, is that one of the reasons why the team was really successful is that we weren't handcuffed to our traditions and our histories, but we expansively looked at the opportunities coming in the next tour. We looked at the route, we knew the team personnel, and we adjusted. We found new innovations that we brought to the game. So again, I think that that's a kind of a typical way of creating things that are kind of leading edge, should I say, and to have had that privilege and opportunity. There's nothing more that anybody could have asked for, like in my position, to be able to do that.
It just
so
yeah, it just doesn't make sense, because as I started, the question was, I listed maybe two handful of athletes that are known globally. There's a lot of great athletes in the world, but there's only a few that have that global impact. And that's where I feel like that champion's mindset comes from that you were talking about. Like, whether you use drugs or don't use drugs, and in the end of the day, he had a global impact, and that's a champion's mindset. With or without drugs, no one can do what he did unless you have that mindset. So it's crazy for you to take away that impact that he can have from there on, or even more to our kids. And it's just like very unfortunate. I feel like society just wants to make an example of people. They just pick and choose, like, oh, we're going to pick this random, close our eyes, pick a random person, and we're going to make an example out of him. So other people that are doing the same thing he's doing, it's kind of understand it. But it is unfortunate, but I appreciate you speaking on it. And I know
my pleasure. Look, I've seen him do things like, some of the charitable acts that he does were amazing. He would call people's father up that had cancer that just came to him. He'd do it on the spot. I've seen that. And remember one training camp that we were doing in Europe. I mean, they rode after, like 130 miles on a bike. They had a 10-mile climb to the top in rain and snow, and it was the worst ever. So the riders get to the top and everybody peels off their clothes. They get in the warm cars, they get at the warm tea, and he turns around and goes back down the hill and rides back up again.
No drug is going to be able to do that. I don't care what drug you're on. That's a mindset thing. No drug can make you have that mindset.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
The opportunity to share them.
I think it's just, again, I think we're on the same page on it. It's an unfortunate situation. Unfortunately, it's how society is. And I love the facts of how you speak about the mind and stuff. I think people just need to really learn about those things. I know we're running out of short time, but I want to, if I can, 2-3 more questions. Cut me off if you're
I will.
to go.
Yeah.
You love art and street graffiti. You actually, I have done my research. You've done
your research.
And you actually did some glass blowing. And funny enough, I every interview I've heard you talk, you haven't really much talked deeply about the glass blowing. And why I want to bring it up is because my dad is actually a glass blowing artist. So when I heard that,
no kidding.
I connected with it on a deeper level than maybe the other people. What is about art that plays in your life? What role does art play in your life?
Well, it really, I'm kind of a sculptor of people's bigger futures, actually. Because anything that involves creativity, I think is a form of art, whether it's 2-dimensional, whether it's 3-dimensional, whether it's in the human domain or whatever. Anything that has creativity involved in it, I'm interested in that. Because for me, the thing I kind of live for is uncensored possibility thinking about the unimaginable or the improbable or the impossible. I love conversations about that. And so what I do know is that there's only one of us in all of creation, as I said earlier. So every client that I have has a potential, correct? Like every blank canvas has a potential.
Mm-hmm.
And so we decide what we're going to do with that blank canvas. And there are certain things that arise in process. And when we remain receptive to innovative ideas that show up in process, then we can create something that transcends what we believe to be initially possible. That's why, I feel like when you answer a calling and you stay open to insights and revelations, and as you're in process and you make the adjustments and you follow that, not trying to be too rigid to finish what you set out to get to, because it may be much lesser than is possible if you don't follow the creative process. So to me, that's the biggest lesson, because when I was working on a piece of art, things would be suggested to me, well, why don't you put the hand in this position? So I do it. I didn't come up with that. It got put into my consciousness. So I did it. Then that suggested something else. And then it became a product above and beyond what I ever could have conceived of. And I feel that we should be an artist rather than a technician in life. And regardless of what it is that we're doing, if we approach it with that level of receptivity, which is a key word here, then we have the chance to live a life of extraordinary achievement and wonderment, and where miracles can happen.
Yeah. When I was growing up, I played the violin and I played the keyboard. And I think something that I always heard was like, people that are into art have a different side of the brain that works very differently. And that's what I thought of when you spoke on that. Another thing that you speak very highly on, which I relate to so much, is mentors. And I believe no one has made it to the top and stayed at the top, which is something you emphasize a lot, never not had a mentor. Mentors have played a key role in your life and success. And I think you would agree that you wouldn't have any of the success that you have now without your mentors. And when I did my dig deep research on you, I never heard the names of your mentors. So I did some digging and I found two. And I want you to tell me the first thing that comes into your mind and the role they played in your life and how impactful they were. The first one, Alex Baum. I'm not sure if I'm saying his last name right.
Yeah.
Alex Baum and John Burton.
Yeah. Well, Alex, he was the Frenchman. I met him. He had a very short stature, had a very, very eloquent presence of being about him, a dignity, a resolution, a confidence in self that was not bravado, but just tranquility of being. Thick accented person who I met in the cycling world. And he did things for me that nobody else could have done. He was truly an angel. I have 3 or 4 angels. He's one of them. And I wanted to be like him because he had such dignity and composure. And he had a presence of being. He was really a reconciled human being. And I found out that he was a World War II concentration camp survivor, exposed to the most heinous, unimaginable cruelty, but yet he was reconciled to that. And he built a life of charity and contribution based on that. And I didn't know that at the time, but that explained to me why he had such dignity. And look, every one of us is going to have what I call a rite of passage, where something happens that's so deep that it's so bad you can't avoid it. But it causes us to ask a deeper set of questions that we would never ask if your life is too good. People's life is too good. They're kind of shallow, quite honestly. And so when we start asking this deeper set of questions, we unearth a potential that's already within us with generally what becomes our best work. And so I learned that from Alex. And then from John Burton. He was a Renaissance man who I met when I was 18. He was 76. And he chose me to be his apprentice to help him create his art class masterpieces. And he was also a Renaissance man, a playwright. He had an Emmy award-winning film about his creative philosophy. He was a university-trained metallurgist. I mean, he was a true Renaissance man. And where John came into my life is that when I helped him create his masterpieces as his apprentice, while I was training to become an Olympian, while I was a student at USC, at our breaks and at lunch, he would play classical music to me. He would read the great literary works of history to me. He would read the poets and the playwrights and the philosophers. He said, I need to fill you up on this stuff, which I had the proclivity to do. So I had Alex's humanity. That was really hard. And from John, I got the soul with the nuanced side of living because I could receive it. And from my cycling coach, Jack Disney, I developed the body-mind side of it. So there was this kind of tripod of mind, body, soul, spirit that was serviced by these 3 angels that drew forth in me what was already there to create this composite me that looks at life through the lens of what's unique to me. But don't ask me how unique it is. I don't know. It's just something I do because it comes naturally to me. So I'm eternally grateful to them and everybody that's played a role in my life because it would not be possible without that.
I think I do as much research on the guests that I have as much as on them. I do as much as on their mentors because I think you learn a lot about who that person is depending on who their mentor is. And it's no surprise you are who you are. Looking at your mentors, they were very, very interesting and powerful people, and not only in your life, but in everyone's life. 2 more questions. I have one that you can make them short. We always love hearing I'm proud of you from our mom, dad, or wife, girlfriend, whoever it is. When was a moment in your life that you sat down with yourself and thought, I'm proud of me?
I've never thought of it like that because, my scorecard might be different from other people. Because as I said before, I don't chase dreams. I answer call-ins. And someone asked me, well, be kind of a morbid thought, but what do you want to be known for? At the end of the day, it's simple. I answered the call. I was fearless. I have no personal ambition to showcase myself, or to be the superstar. I could care less about that. That never occurs to me. It's like, if I can walk off the field knowing that I answered the call, then I can walk off the field with having resolved and being at peace with myself, because there's nothing more I could have done in this dimension. Yeah, it's even probably the most significant thing that we didn't talk about is my daughter. It's like raising my adopted daughter. We adopted from Colombia at the age of 10. I pulled back on my professional availability to raise her as a gold medal father, as did my wife. That was the most important thing that we've ever done. The best lesson ever for me. It's been 15 years now. The first 10 years were unbelievably difficult. My wife cried every day for 9 years and 10 months. It was so hard. Yeah. But it's okay, man.
Yeah.
If you get the calling, you show up for duty and you be fearless. You do what you got to get done, and you trust the process. And on the other side of that, it creates a certain level of immunity against life and the usual things that derail people. It gives you a certain sense of, I think, invincibility, because you're not tethered to the measurements and the yardsticks that most people look at as living a credible life with all this stuff. So it's been a different journey for me, and I'm still in the game. I love what I do. I care about my clients a lot. I'm always learning. Can't wait to wish I didn't have to sleep so I can get more stuff done. But, the rules are still the same. So,
well, I'll tell you this. I've watched over 20 hours of your podcast for today. And you've definitely made an impact on me. And I don't even know you like that, because watching you seem like a very humble person, and which makes you even more likable. We talked about our email conversation. The way you emailed me, I actually was going to talk about it, but we can do that for another time. It was very, in a humble way, made me be like, I want to learn more about this person. Wow, how are they? You ended your first email to me as onward and upward. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I love that. So you've definitely made an impact on me, for sure, by just studying you in a short amount of time. And I'll leave it on this last question. If we went back to undergrad, high school, and asked your best friend, asked your best buddy, your favorite teacher, who was Jeff, what would they say?
I don't know the exact words, but he was different. I've always, it's like I feel like I can go anywhere and be part of everything, but I don't fit one place singularly. And maybe that does kind of explain the idea, what do you call me? I don't know. And that's okay too, because it's still an experiment in progress.
Awesome, Jeff. Dr. Spencer, I really appreciate your time. And
Thank
anyone
you.
that's watch it to this end, I not only encourage you to go watch this episode. Actually, if you watch it to this end, you've already watched it, but I encourage you to go Google him and watch all the other podcasts he's on, because hearing you speak really changes your viewpoint and mentality of life, of how you should go through life, how you should look at things, and the explanation of champion mindset, the human mindset, we didn't have the time to get into. I hope we can do it again so we can delve into the other stuff. But
Next time.
You are very, very inspirational and very impactful. I really appreciate it. Any last words, any websites, or anything that you want to plug in? I'll have them all in the description, but the floor is yours.
Sure, yeah. What I would say is that there's always room at the top for the best, and there's only one of you, all a creation. And our job is to step into that and live a life of passion and purpose, because we have aligned, with what our skills and our assets are. www.drjeffspencer.com is the website. Simple, straight to the point. Jeff@drjeffspencer.com is the email address. Please reach out. with that, thank you so much for just an amazing hour, and look forward to maybe round 2.
Of course. Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone watching.